becomes air, apologise. The word hope first appeared in English about 1,000 years ago, denoting some combination of confidence and desire. But what I desired in life was not what I was confident about. It is. When I talk about hope, did I really mean leave some room for unfounded desire? No. Medical statistics not only describe numbers such as mean survival, they measure our confidence in our numbers with tools like confidence levels, confidence intervals, and confidence bounds. So did I mean leave some room for a statistical improbable but still plausible outcome, a survival just above the measured 95% confidence interval? Is that what hope was? Could we divide the curve into existential sections, from defeated to pessimistic to realistic to hopeful to delusional? Weren't the numbers just the numbers? Had we all just given in to the hope that every patient was above average? It occurred to me that my relationship with statistics changed as soon as I became one. Bartleby the Scrivener by Bartleby, 1853. Revolving all these things and coupling them with the recently discovered fact that he made my office his constant abiding place and home, and not forgetful of his morbid moodiness, revolving all these things, a prudential feeling began to steal over me. My first emotions had been those of pure melancholy and sincerest pity, which is in proportion as the forlornness of Bartleby grew and grew to my imagination. Did that same melancholy merge into fear, and pity into repulsion? So true it is, and so terrible too, that up to a certain point, the thought of or sight of misery enlists our best affections. But in certain special cases, beyond that point it is not. They err who would assert that invariably this is owing to the inherent selfishness of the human heart. It rather proceeds from a certain hopelessness of remedying excessive and organic guilt. To a sensitive being, pity is not seldom pain, and when at last it is perceived that such pity cannot lead to effectual succor, common sense bids the soul be rid of it. What I saw that morning persuaded me that the scrivener was the victim of innate and incurable disorder. I might give alms to his body, but his body did not pain him. It was his soul that suffered, and his soul I could not reach. Financial freedom. Forward. What do you do for a living? Before the Industrial Revolution, most people raised or foraged food, fiber, and fodder from the land. Farmers had to be jacks and jills of all trades, masters of all the technologies needed to survive, and they worked in clans and tribes to thrive together. Since the Industrial Revolution, we have answered the above question with our jobs, from mining to management. We said, I'm a miner, a secretary, a teacher, a factory worker, a CEO. Our jobs were our identities in our workplaces, our tribes. The union movement provided a balance of power to the corporation's focus on the bottom line, and our jobs also became our retirement planning and healthcare. Stultifying, perhaps, but secure. In the last decade, though, major forces have exerted pressure on the building blocks of this middle-class existence, with the promise of half a century that every generation will be better off than the last, has landed somewhere in the rubble. What do you do for a living? You can no longer answer with a profession or a role. To make it, You need every tool in this book's toolbox for piecing together a work life that is lucrative as well as balanced. Grant Sebastian was out of money and living back with his parents when he woke up to the fact that job training wasn't coming to save him. He was drifting and knew he would drown if he didn't change direction. Enlightenment can come from a cold hard look at reality. In today's vernacular, Grant got woke. He figured out how to make money through all the legal and ethical opportunities in front of him, and with each step he saw more ways to make money until he went, step by step, from broke to millionaire to financially independent in a little over 5 years. Grant's genius is on full display in the entrepreneurial attitudes and strategies in this practical, fiercely focused book. You may be attracted to the glitter of getting a lot richer, a lot faster than you ever thought possible, but I want you to consider that it is not too much about the money you will make in the next year or two following Grant's approach, but rather about the capacity to make money for the rest of your life, no matter what the economic, financial, or investment landscape offers you. We don't know if robots will clean your house or your version of Alexa, whatever that becomes, not only orders groceries but beats you at poker and sympathizes with you after a tough day. We do know that every human will need to capture the emerging opportunities to get what they need. We will all need this alert relationship with making money. You can regard the contingent or gig or on-demand nature of jobs as a blessing or curse, but on a practical level you will need to adapt. Grant's bigger point, though, is that making a lot of money isn't the point. Time is. Time for love, for learning, for caring, for playing, for contributing to others. That's what you're buying through becoming an effective and efficient earning machine. You can wait your big earning years as you did into your 20s and invest as much as possible in your money-making assets, from the stock market to real estate, so you liberate the rest of your life for your larger dreams. He makes a convincing case that money invested early in your life, through the magic of compounding, grows on its own, making you wealthier by year. You don't have to use these tools to go Grant's route, though. You can use them to make efficient use of every earning hour and opportunity to simply give yourself more non-earning hours throughout your life for your passionate causes or raising a family or your solo hike on the Pacific Crest Trail. In Your Money or Your Life, the book I wrote with Joe Dominguez, that's now a venerable personal finance classic, we suggest that you maximize your income without sacrificing your integrity or your health in service of the promise of financial independence. We put no attention on how to maximize your income. We ourselves had not been working for money for 2 decades. In Chapter 6 of Your Money or Your Life, The American Dream on Shoestring, we offered hundreds of ideas for saving money, some common sense, some radical, but Chapter 7 on work and income had one job: to bust the assumption that work equals earning money. Work is what we do for love, curiosity, contribution, learning, service, self-development, conviviality, homemaking, and home maintenance, shouldering responsibilities for the common good. Most of the world's work has nothing to do with money. We were making the case that readers could exit wage slavery, being compelled to work by the need for money, and join the owners of wealth whose money works for them. In this sense, Grant's book fills a major gap in Your Money or Your Life that I didn't even realize was there. Thank you. Grant and I stand on solid common ground. We believe there is more to life than money, that mastering our relationship with earning, spending, saving, and investing liberates our time for the real work of becoming better human beings and making the world a better place. We also share a passion for the possibility that establishing a solid financial foundation from which to do this more important work should be available to everyone. Our books are one way we are trying to give this gift of freedom to others, but our partnership is about challenging the collective assumptions that behind us to how financial security for everyone could be possible. Just because a just and equitable society where everyone has a chance to develop and give their gifts has been an elusive dream for generations doesn't mean that we should not dream it. It is like the flight attendant's instruction to put your oxygen mask, which flows money rather than air, on first and then assist others around you to put on theirs. This book is your oxygen mask. Put it on. Make money efficiently and effectively and buy your freedom. Then join us in making sure everyone can breathe free. Chapter 1. Money is freedom. I went from $2.26 to $1 million in 5 years. Gran, wake up! My mom yelled to me from the bottom of the stairs. It was 11 a.m. and I slept in again. Waking up in my childhood bedroom, I felt like I was back in middle school, but I was actually 24 years old, unemployed, and living with my parents, a situation all too familiar to millennials like me. It was August 2010. I'd moved back home 2 months earlier after being laid off my job as a researcher at a newspaper. My parents had told me I could crash at home, but that I needed to be out in 3 months, and they weren't going to give me a dime. Every night at dinner, they asked how my job search was going, looking at me skeptically as I tried to avoid eye contact. The truth is, I'd recently stopped applying to jobs. I'd sent out over 200 resumes in the past month alone and hadn't gotten a single callback. You can send only so many resumes into the ABs before it starts crushing your soul. As I rolled over in bed that August morning, I tried to think about anything other than my current financial situation. In any case, I had an even more primal desire. I was craving a Chipotle burrito. I knew I was getting low on funds, so reluctantly I checked my account balance on my phone. The savings account I'd labeled "Do Not Touch" right after I'd lost my job had $0.01 in it. My checking account balance was scarcely better, $2.26, barely enough to afford a side of guacamole, let alone a whole burrito. I took a screenshot of my account to remember this feeling and serve as motivation for the future. Eventually, I hung the picture in my closet as a daily reminder, and I still see it every morning. Defeated but still hungry, I made myself a turkey sandwich and headed outside to the backyard. It was an unreasonably cool summer day in the DC suburbs. The sound of lawnmowers and neighborhood kids enjoying the last week of summer vacation filling the air. I threw myself down on the grass just as I'd done so many times as a kid. As I looked up into the clear blue sky, piercing only by the occasional plane headed to Washington National Airport, I contemplated how I'd arrive at this point. I'd always done what I was supposed to do. I'd gone to a top university, worked hard, gotten good grades, and even managed to get a job offer before I graduated. After graduation, I started working for an analytics company and assumed I was now on the path to building wealth and becoming a successful adult. But as it turned out, I was making a huge trade-off. My first job was located in a stereo office park 2 hours away from where I lived. The windows of my building didn't open, and the office manager couldn't be bothered to replace the air filter, so the air was always stale. I sat in a 4-foot wide half cubicle under fluorescent lights too bright they were almost blinding, so bright. I was so worried about doing a good job and making sure my boss liked me that by the time I got home, I was too wiped out to do anything fun. I zoned out in front of the TV and overeat out of freedom. I gained 20 pounds, and even though I was tired all the time, I had trouble sleeping because I was too anxious about the next day. At 4:50 a.m., the alarm would go off, and I'd crawl out of bed to repeat the routine once again. As the day wore on, I'd watch the minutes of my life tick by on my computer clock. I'll get used to it. My dad told me about a way of encouragement when I called to complain. Welcome to the real world. I tried to convince myself that this would all be worth it, that every minute I spent behind the desk and every dollar I earned was 1 minute and $1 closer to some distant dream future in which I could live the life I wanted to live. But in reality, I was actually just trading my time for enough money to pay my bills. I got paid twice a month and was living paycheck to paycheck. The first check went directly to rent, while the second went to paying off my credit card balance, which always seemed to keep going up. I told myself I would save money at the end of the month, but I actually ended up spending more than I was making. I worked hard all week, so I went out and spent recklessly on the weekend. Work hard, play hard, right? I assured myself I would save money next month, that I would save money when I was making more money, that I would save money when I was older. Then, just 6 months after I started my job, I got fired because I wasn't making the company enough money. I literally did the math and realized that in those 6 months, I traded 1,400 hours of my life for $15,500 after taxes. And not only did I have nothing left, I owned $12,000 in credit card debts. Over the next 2 years, I bounced between unemployment and a few other jobs, but I still never managed to save anything. I was so worried about money that I started suffering from debilitating anxiety attacks so powerful that my heart felt like it would stop beating, and I literally thought I was going to die. I was letting the best hours of my life during the best years of my life burn out with each bi-weekly paycheck. It sucked, but I was far from alone in my plight. According to Gallup's annual survey of the American workforce in 2017, 70% of employees in the United States were disengaged at work. Meanwhile, 69% of Americans have less than $1,000 savings and live one disaster away from poverty, bankruptcy, or crippling debt. When the Great Recession hit, I lost my job again. By the time I showed up back on my parents' doorstep after 3 years in the worker world, I had traded 4,700 hours of my life for $87,000 after taxes. And besides the $2.26, I had absolutely nothing to show for it. I didn't even have my prized Volkswagen camper van anymore because I'd sold it 6 months before just to make ends meet. As I lay there in the backyard, my thoughts of the past turned to thoughts of the future. As I considered my options, I saw the next 4 years, the best years of my life, stretched out before me. I imagined myself stuck in another bleak office, in another nondescript office park, in another stifling cubicle. If I somehow managed to save enough of my salary after all my bills were paid, I might be able to retire in my 60s. Given the trends of my generation, however, even that dismal prospect seemed unlikely. Among the 83 billion millennials in the United States, the average income is $35,592 per year, less than half of what our parents made at our age when adjusted for inflation. With an average of $36,000 in student loan debt, most of us didn't get out of debt for years, let alone start to save any real money. If we look closely at these numbers, it's no wonder we aren't saving enough to retire in even 3 to 4 decades. While investment guides generally recommend you sock away 10 to 15% of your income, even though, as I later learned, that definitely isn't enough. Millennials under 25 are saving only 3.9% of their income for retirement, while older millennials, those aged 25 or 34 to 34, are saving 5.35%. This will make it impossible for most of us to even retire. Literally impossible. In case that doesn't scare you enough, who knows how decisions by our government and shifts in the economy will affect our futures? Will Social Security even be around in 4 years? Will we be able to afford healthcare as costs go up as our need for it becomes greater? Inflation isn't slowing down anytime soon, meaning our poetry savings will end up being worth even less than it is today. What are we supposed to do? Work until we fall down dead at our desks? We're on our own. I realized that doing everything I was supposed to do wouldn't guarantee anything, even retirement in 40 plus years. What kind of life is that? I didn't want to spend my days in a job I hated just so I could get by. I wanted to feel passionate about my work and love my life. I didn't want to worry about money all the time or depend on a boss who might decide to fire me at any minute just so I could pay my rent. I wanted to be in control of my own income and time. I didn't want to put off traveling the world because I couldn't afford it or I was allowed only 10 days of vacation a year. I wanted to be able to have enough time to really explore the world. I didn't want to spend the most precious moments of my future kids' lives in an office. I wanted to be there to watch them grow and help them figure out how to realize their own dreams. And I didn't want to wake up at 65 and realize that I traded more than 70,000 hours of my life working a 9 to 5 for what? I wanted more money. I wanted more life. I realized that if I wanted something different, I was going to have to do something different. So that day, lying in the grass, I set 2 seemingly unrealistic goals. To save $1 million and to retire as quickly as possible. I didn't know how I was going to do it, or even if I was going to be able to do it. But I spent the next 5 years doing everything I could to make it happen. I read every personal finance book and investigating guide I could get my hands on. I worked a 9 to 5 job for benefits and connections, but then launched 2 companies and started several side hustles to earn extra income. I saved 25%, then 40%, then up to 80% of my income some month and put that money to work in the stock market so it could grow. And I figured out how I could optimize my lifestyle to maximize my income and savings and have a lot of fun along the way. Fast forward 5 years later to 2015, I had a net worth of over $1 million. I didn't win the lottery or come into some surprise inheritance. I didn't strike it rich on some hot new app that I sold to Google for $1 billion. I didn't hustle for the mob or rob any banks. I simply learned everything I could, questioned all the popular advice about money I came across, and maximized the value of my time through a combination of personal finance, entrepreneurship, and investing. 3 things absolutely everyone, even someone with $2.26 in bank and a lack of marketable skills, can learn to do on their own. Personal finance, entrepreneurship, and investing. I'll admit it wasn't easy. In fact, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. The strategies I used require some effort and discipline, but they aren't complicated. What made my journey difficult was that it required me to step out my comfort zone, take some calculated risks, and do things that no one else around me was doing, that no one I knew had done. A lot of people thought I was crazy, and even my girlfriend wouldn't come over to visit my crappy but inexpensive apartment. I definitely made decisions that many people wouldn't even consider. I was living on the edge, but I had mission, and that kept me motivated. I also learned an insane amount about how almost anyone can find ways to save and make more money. One of the most profound lessons I've learned along the way is that most of the accepted wisdom about money, work, and retirement is either incorrect, incomplete, or so old school it's obsolete. We've accepted this version of the real world because it's what others have done for generations, but it just doesn't work anymore. Unless you maybe want to retire in 30 or 4 years. Things have changed, and despite all the pessimism surrounding the financial prospects for so many people today, it's actually never been easier to make more money, manage your own money, and live a life free from the typical 9 to 5. The challenge is in opening yourself up to the opportunity, questioning the advice and example of others, and learning to do things differently, even if people think you're crazy. Most of what's in this book wasn't even possible 10 years ago. None of it is taught in schools, and most people you know aren't even aware that it's possible. I learned it only because I made it my mission to do so and dedicated thousands and thousands of hours to learning everything I could, testing it for myself and making mistakes from which I could learn. Once I realized how much knowledge I had gained, I knew I needed to share with the world.